so much for the opportunity. Um, I'm by trade a psychiatrist, and then I'm working as a medical director for Cigna now. And I'm very excited to actually talk to you guys today about the issue of loneliness. It's an epidemic that we don't talk enough about. And Cigna really had put a lot of effort into looking at this. They did some research last year that I will share with you. And I definitely see a connection and opportunity for telepsychiatry to really contribute to reduce this epidemic. So first of all, we need to make a differentiation between what is loneliness and what is being alone. All of us want to be alone sometimes, and that's perfectly fine. When we have a stressful day, we just want to be by ourselves, reduce the stress, just get in touch with our thoughts, come up with new ideas. So it's something that it's a state of being. It's something that we're choosing to do. Versus loneliness is something that we don't choose to be. People feel left out. People feel alone. It can cause stress. Stress then disrupt that body emotional connection, causing a lot of issues in the long run that we'll talk a little bit more about. So, the big question is, are you considered lonely? And that's the question that Cigna was looking at when they developed this study. And the study was done last year. And they enrolled about 20,000 patients via an online questionnaire. And it lasted for about 2 weeks. And it was on adults 18 and older. And what they found was that really most Americans are considered lonely. So looking at different generations, surprisingly enough, Generation Z was considered the loneliest generation. And you start thinking about that, well, I would think probably maybe elderly would be considered that. And then my second thought was, well, maybe it's social media. This generation is always on the cell phones, on the iPads. So, but they actually look at, this is pretty much, the numbers on it. And one curious thing here is also Generation Z also saw their health as being bad, almost as an old person as well. So social media actually was found on this particular study not to be a predictor for loneliness. So there was people that were very heavy users of social media versus people that hardly were using it, and they would have the same proportion of of being lonely. But let's not undermine the elderly. Definitely, there is a big component of loneliness in the elderly, and it's been associated with poor grooming, poor eating habits, and poor hygiene. And there is actually a risk of people dying just from this. So there's an increased risk of dying just because you feel lonely. And what is the pathophysiology of this? So pretty much, when people feel lonely, the body secretes stress hormones. Those stress hormones cause inflammation, and then the inflammation then can lead to a higher risk of some medical conditions, such as cardiovascular diseases, diabetes, depression. It's a fact also that, and it's been looked at, that elderly that suffer from loneliness, they have a twofold risk of developing Alzheimer's as well. And then obviously depression can even lead to suicide attempts, which is very concerning. And because we are in a group of people, that doesn't mean that you might not feel lonely. So what separates being lonely, if you're surrounded with people? And what that is like really the use of meaningful connections, right? And we look at that on that study, and only 2 out of 5, or 2 in 5 lack meaningful relationships. And I look at this, I have 2 teenagers. One is 18, my daughter is 18, my son is 17. My daughter is very introverted. I mean, she's shy, socially, she's having a bit more issues there. But she does have like 3 or 4 very good friends that are with her in goods and in bads. My son, on the contrary, is very social. He practices sports. He's there all the time. But then really when it comes to meaningful relationships, I don't think that he has, maybe one that's meaningful relationships. So when I look at that, then I'm more concerned about like the risk that he might have compared to my daughter to develop loneliness in a later life. So this is an important slide because loneliness has been associated or is as deadly as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. That's almost a pack, right? How many in a pack? 20 or something? So, I mean, that is a big predictor for your health. On this slide, I mean, the main thing that I wanted to point out is that increase of the risk of suicide. So, I mean, really then, to combat this epidemic, really in-person interactions do matter. Even being employed and having good relationship with your coworkers is good for your health and for your risk to develop loneliness issues. So what are the ingredients here for meaningful connections? So, I mean, talk to people, trust people, compromise, be engaged, accepting. And balance is key. So like, we all know those people that, I mean, they're very concentrated on like good eating habits, exercise, putting the safety belt when they drive. But if they're not really having meaningful relationships, then they're at risk for loneliness, and that really is putting a big risk on their health. So balance is key here. And what steps can we do to avoid this? Taking small step. I mean, if you're sort of like an introverted, just maybe you need to schedule the time, try to find some common grounds with some people, talk to people around you. I mean, one example is when you're on the airplane, I mean, some people already put like the headphones, so like they're just giving you the impression you don't want to talk to me. So, I mean, there's some challenges, but you can go around that. And connections are there. They're just waiting for you. So be kind to yourself and others, be brave, be engaged, authentic, be yourself, be patient, because it might take time to make some connections. And there are no strangers here, only friends you haven't yet met. So, I mean, having said that, I mean, I think that there is a big opportunity to use telehealth services for people that are isolated, for just to reach out, just to say hi, just to have that connection with those people. So I mean, pretty much, I mean, that was the gist of this talk. So I will entertain some questions.
Hi. This is a very interesting talk and very unexpected at a meeting like this, but you address problems. What would you attribute the causes in modern society? I have some thoughts, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, there is many things, and I mean, I don't think that there's just one thing that is causing it, but I'll be really happy to hear what are your thoughts on it. But.
I've been around a long time. I think a lot of it dates back to the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and how it's been handled, and how this is played out in the media. The media is awful. I think I've read that there's an advertising axiom that bad news sells. They make more money. I can't think of when I've seen good news on television or usual media. And the Generation Z that you've affected as the youngest ones of all. You can't get them to make eye contact with you. Anyway, it's horrible.
Right.
But I think it's the product of 50 years of various government regulations and technology.
And one of the theories that I have is like, I mean, these days we put so much pressure on the kids and everything. So like when I was in kindergarten, my main role was to play and be social. Mm-hmm. Now they have to know math, they have to know all the alphabet, they have to. So I mean, I think that if we are not concentrating on the social interactions that needs to happen, I think that's a big issue that might be contributing to it.
Just a little aside, something I've adopted. I live in Dallas, and though I'm from a small town in Mississippi originally, and a small town, you know everybody, you always speak. And I'm in and about the grocery store, the usual here and there, and you can never get them to make eye contact. And I've gotten to where I just deliberately say, "How are you today?" It shocks them, but
exactly. So let's make the effort.
Yeah, very interesting talk.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello. Hi. Yeah.
Hi.
Thank you, and thanks for your comment there. I like that. Just get in there and say hello. My name is, again, Paul Rashid. I'm a psychiatrist with your similar background. I actually did a fellowship through the VA system for psychosocial rehabilitation, and I actually wrote a book on social therapy to address these exact questions. So I really found this interesting. My question is for your role, and thank you for presenting this interesting study. What are you going to do with this? What is Cigna and you in your role going forward to address this problem?
Well, I mean, here at Cigna, we were trying to really, promote the use of telehealth. So eventually, I would like to see, results with these conditions and other conditions, and see how that pans out. But I mean, it is really, we want to promote the use of telehealth. We're big advocates for it, and we definitely pay for it, and so.
I have a question. Oh.
Yeah, and that's a really good point. Thanks for bringing that up. And I think that, a lot of that, there's a lot of stigma still that we need to educate about it. But yes, I agree with that. Yes.
So thank you for the presentation. I had a very similar question to you. How are we going to put it into place? So as a follow-on to that, we know that generation also, their leading cause of death is suicide. And the number is just getting worse and worse. And so if I could give a recommendation to Cigna is to try to work with the National Network of Depression Centers, because they have a great source of funding that this research that you've done could couple with academicians across the US at the top institutions. So I would really recommend that to Cigna, put that work to play.
Thank you for that. I'll take that back.
Hello. Yeah. I have two questions, actually. One is that when we look at the healthcare system transforming from what it was in 1900s, early 1900s and 1800s, was when your doctor was your friend and was part of your family. And now that's one thing is that we always complain about is missing in the healthcare. So moving forward to telemedicine, telehealth, are we going to lose more of that connection? And how is that going to affect the loneliness in the patients? Because so many of the elderlies, they come to see their family medicine doctor as their social point. The second question is that now UK has, I think last year they announced Ministry of Loneliness, considering it's a national health risk and an epidemic. Is there anything happening in the United States, any authorities looking into that as a national health risk?
I'll take the second question first, and I mean, I think that there is a lot of work that still need to happen with this. Again, I mean, this is not something that we talk a lot about. I don't know how many of you had heard about this before. So, I mean, there is a lot of questions to talk about that. And then on the other question, that was more related to the use of. Right, so I mean, pretty much, I mean, I think that really using it in any way, I mean, even if it's just a therapist reaching out to the patient, and or even using like just people to just say hi to somebody, I mean, those are things that can be used, I mean, just to really have that elderly person that maybe lives in a rural area that's having no contact at all, maybe the family members are not even calling, to have at least that type of contact. So something is better than nothing, is what, you know, what I think.
Great. Thank you so much for that really,
thank you.
really interesting.